Hi, this is Roberto Casada, and I'm here with Walter at the screening of Phantasm, remastered at the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. And I just wanted to let Walter know that I'm a big fan of iWalter.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird brain, it's a plane, it's iWalter. Yes, it's iWalter, strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. iWalter, who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend ears with his annoying voice, and who disguised as Walter Interranti, mild-mannered janitor for a great metropolitan newspaper, fights a never-ending battle for truth, nonsense, and the American way. And now, another exciting episode in the adventures of iWalter.
Okay, hey, it's Walter. I actually was not going to do a show tonight, and then I kind of felt like I was compelled that I needed to do one. I'll probably be off for a couple days. Sorry about that. I'll probably be off for a couple days because I need to kind of rest up or do other things besides the iWalter show, even though it's been almost, I can't remember the last show I did. I think it was maybe it was on the weekend. I can't remember now, folks. So anyway, my one supervisor, or somebody asked me, by the way, they said, oh, so, because I left on time for my job, so somebody asked me, they said, oh, what are you going to do on iWalter tonight? Are you going to do a show at like 2 in the morning or something like that? I was like, no, actually, I'm not going to do any show at all because I really got to get some sleep. I'm so far behind on sleep right now, folks. It's crazy, and I don't mind because the overtime's been paying for some wishful things that I had bought again, and so I'm not getting myself into any major debt. One thing I actually did buy, and I'm going to use that as my slogan tonight. I really have no stories because I still don't have a Facebook account. I think at this point it may never come back, and they made it very difficult for me to come on if I want to do it legitimately. Because I want it to be as accurate as possible, my information. Well, they asked certain information. They said, you already have an account. Why don't you just log in your other account? You can't open another one. So the only way I'll be able to open a Facebook account is to make an alias name or, go by something else. And I really don't like doing that. It's not my nature to do that. I want to keep everything as legit as possible. I know some people say we don't want to do that. They don't want their information out there. I'm kind of like, well, even just the basic information, I don't feel right just making up some bogus name. I wanted to be as legitimate. I guess they do that just to weed out people, but they weeded me out because I can't even get back on because of that. I can't really use that as my source that I normally do for a lot of information. It makes my podcasting very easy. If I had more time, I would have probably spent more time focusing on doing my own research, which I've gotten lazy because Facebook did it all for me. I basically found people of interest or places of interest or events of interest, and they just automatically, I plopped them on Facebook. They were there. And Facebook, generally, after a while, kind of followed my pattern and know what I was looking for and, did homework for me, I guess. They did the homework for me. I didn't have to do it myself. Doing research because eventually it just kind of followed the pattern of stuff I looked at. So again, it just makes it not as easy, and because of that, I'm not spending the kind of time I did before, doing these podcasts. Plus, I've just been working a lot. So my last toy, so I'm sorry I didn't mention that yet, was I did order, and it came last night, or yesterday, I should say. It was about a day ago. But I was just so tired. I got it up and running. It was an iWatch, by the way. I'm beating around the bush, and it's too early in the morning. It's like 4 o'clock to start a show. It's not a good thing to do on a work night. So, I was kind of skeptic at first because I had an iWatch when it first came out, and I wasn't too pleased with it. But I think the main problem, honestly, I had was I got it's not much of a difference, but they have one that the watch is actually 38 meters. And then they have one that is, I think, 42 millimeters, not meters. God, that thing would be like too big to even put on your body, more or less your arm. So I apologize. Yeah, the first, there's two sizes for these watches. And the first one that came out kind of was a little like, this one's not much better, but it's a little bit better. The first one, you actually have to have your phone in distance to even use any of the gizmos on the phone. Like, it has to be in short range. Now, the new one actually has a built-in GPS, and that was like a point that kind of like got my interest peaked. It's the other one, other iWatch. Did I say phone? Because if I did, I apologize, because I'm just trying to get this quickly done, fill people in what I'm kind of going to do in the near future for show, since I have to take different tactics. And it might even actually force me to do more interviews. I don't know yet. At least try. My one friend, Matt, said he was going to kind of help me with that, try to do some interviews and stuff, or set up people just to ask them, hey, can you do a plug for my show? Or, like, again, maybe some type, can I ask a couple questions? Because, again, you could always do something with someone and get some rather extensive information off of them, things I may have not known before, and I like to continue to do that if I can. And it makes it more interesting to me just reading the same story. Well, they're not the same stories, but the same pattern. I try to keep it different every time, and I think I do. For the most part, when I'm not complaining about stuff, it's always the same issues with that. So, there was something I was going to say. Oh, yeah, the iWatch. There's two sizes, a 38. I did some research for a while, kind of got interested. I thought I was... The one thing I was not interested in and at all was the iWatch. It is something that Steve Jobs would basically never put out. Now, it's kind of funny because I've owned every Apple product pretty much in existence at this point, minus the very rather expensive stuff, which would be the new Mac Pros, not books, but the Mac Pros, because they're around $10,000. So they're a very unrealistic price. And it's just more than I can even handle for a piece of equipment, electronic equipment. I think that's just ridiculous for a computer, paying $10,000 for a computer. It starts out, the base price is like $4,000, but it basically goes up to about $10,000. So, yeah, that's not like something I can actually grasp onto. I'm trying to look at my levels. They're going kind of low, but it says everything's reading properly. Well, we'll listen back and figure out what's going on then. Yeah, so that's the one thing I haven't bought. I actually have an iPad, and honestly, I bought one. I've had many different iPads, and then I never used them. My one oldest brother, he has an iPad. He uses his actually constantly all the time. I'm making sure my mic's properly adjusted, by the way. And, the last one I had got rid of was an iPad mini. I sold it to a friend, and it was a good deal for him because I always buy extended warranties and stuff, so he gets more than he bargained for, and I always buy cases and covers and stuff for this stuff. So he made out rather well. Me, though, I'm the one who takes the loss on this stuff, and after I sold it, I was like, wait a minute, I actually wouldn't mind just having an iPad, even though I don't use it all the time, mainly for when I go in the bathroom. When I'm doing my business in the bathroom, one or two, not the other type of business, then I can just basically, have an iPad, just grab it and read it on while I'm sitting down, relieving myself. I don't know how else to say it. Not in the way, again, that you're probably thinking, but yeah, just basically having to use the bathroom. How's that? And yeah, so, and then you know what? I've never done that yet because basically I always, since I've gotten the bigger iPhones, which are not humongous, but I've gotten the bigger iPhones, I've actually brought those in and did the same thing I was intending to do with the iPad. So, and both times I've owned now every type of iPad except the iPad Air. The iPad Pro I've never owned, but I've owned the different versions up to the iPad 2, I think. 1 and 2 I owned, and then I had the iPad mini twice now. And the second one I've held on to, and I was ready, well, I actually use the phone more than anything else. almost ready to get rid of it, but then I'm afraid if I get rid of it, then I'll say, you know what, maybe I was too hasty on that. So even if it just sits there for the rest of my life, that iPad mini, I will not get rid of it again and go through the same mistake of buying another one. So some things you just soak up the cost, and if you know that you're not going to use it, keep it anyway on that kind of stuff, because that's the way I'm. Then I'll end up saying, well, why did they get rid of it? I should have kept it. So, and yeah. So anyway, I kind of was thinking the same thing with the iWatch. It's like, okay, there's really no purpose for an iWatch for the most part. It's basically a glorified watch that does a little bit more. It takes cell phone calls. It actually plays music. You can actually talk into it like a Dick Tracy walkie-talkie thing or whatever. If you ever heard of Dick Tracy, when he used to communicate over a watch, he actually would take calls. I mean, you're talking before even my time. And it kind of does similar things. That's going to be the next step, though. You're probably able to do, I wouldn't doubt it, I'm sure in the near future, some point in time that Apple probably will say, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Why don't you do FaceTime on the watch? Who knows? That might be the next step. But they did put GPS in there. There's certain things you can do. It's a goofy thing that I do like. One of the interfaces, which is the one I use the most, you can check your heart rate, which is kind of interesting, and it actually tells you how many calories you burn during a day. And it can send it back, because it's a GPS. It can actually send all that information back to your other devices without the phone even being there. It does have, again, literally a built-in GPS, so you can actually use maps and stuff on this little small screen on your wrist. But the main purpose of that GPS is for tracking if you do exercise. But it does kind of serve other purposes, too, that I've noticed. That GPS, that was the main thing that I keep on going back to, that I liked about it. Now, the cheapest one's about $269, I think, for the basic model. And that's all I really wanted. But another thing was, again, I mentioned two sizes. One, I think, is meant for a woman's wrist, and the other one is meant for a man's wrist. But I had a problem. I bought the bigger 42-millimeter watch, and I have, I don't know if it's just me, but I have right at your wrist, I got on both my hands. I guess everybody does, but you have that bone that is, right around your wrist. Well, the bigger watch actually dug into that bone on the side of your wrist, and it really hurt most of the time. It was very annoying. Because the watch isn't humongous, but it's big enough just to be in an awkward spot. So that was okay, and plus it was just a nuisance to wear. So if you're not wearing it, it serves no purpose. So I was okay, I'll try the 38-millimeter one, which is not that much smaller, but it's just enough that it's not actually digging into the side of my wrist like it did before. So that part was a plus. The old one that I had gotten, and I sold it just because I only had it for a very brief time, and I sold it, so I almost basically got as much as what I bought it for. So I lucked out because, I didn't have it that long. It's well, I can't sell it. And the funny thing was, all they wanted when I sold it, I think I got $400 or $500 for the other one when I had it. The only thing they really wanted was the watch itself. They didn't care about anything else, because they could go turn around and resell that watch and make a profit still off of it, which I didn't make a profit, but I didn't lose any money as well. Not that much, at least. So on the original iWatch. And again, it was just something that I refused to buy, because originally it was something that Jobs would have never put out there. But the second one looked a little more impressive. The tweaks are very seldom. One of the biggest ones, which mostly every watch actually does anyway, is before the first one was water repellent, which means you can sprinkle water pellets on, you can spritz water on the top of the watch and it won't get ruined. The new one is actually just like most surf watches, the cheap ones like Shark and everything. It is now water resistant up to 50 meters, which is actually pretty deep. Now, they made a big discussion and they said, okay, when we say it's water resistant, it is, but don't use it for any intense sports like surfing, water skiing, or things like that. Now, they said if you go, I think maybe possibly scuba diving was acceptable, or any type of water snorkel. I think it does. I'm not even kidding, folks. It says water snorkeling is okay. Something that's not actually putting pressure on the watch. You are allowed to go submerge the watch in water, but you just have to be careful. I guess not careful, but if it's intense sports, they're not going to guarantee it. If it's just basically swimming with it on, that's not a big deal. So, it's kind of weird how they make their speculations up on the watch, but it does have a lot of things that most people like. One person who actually I see he wears it still, because I checked out one of his podcasts tonight, is Rush Limbaugh. Because he records all his shows on video as well as do them live. He actually records them live. And I'm a member of Rush's, the Rush Limbaugh service, whatever you want to call it. His, I have an account with him that I, purchase yearly. I think the last time I actually purchased it for 2 years. Now, he had his watch on. Now, he has the bigger one. I don't like it. It's very uncomfortable, the bigger face on the watch. And even though it's small, it kind of does serve some purpose. The watch actually, the watches have what everything else of Apple has. It has Retina display, which doesn't make much sense on a screen that is very small on a phone, because the phones have that. The computer monitors do. Mostly anything you buy from Apple anymore has Retina display. Now, the only where it actually makes sense on something as small as a watch face cover or whatever is probably the Retina display. Makes a lot of sense on a screen that's only 38 millimeters, and obviously one that's 42, because there's not much difference. And you're saying, well, why is that? Because you're looking at something so small that if you don't have very good clarity, like, it's higher resolution or the clarity is much sharper, on something that small, it's just going to look like a blur. And I have really bad eyesight, nearsightedness or farsightedness now. Well, I can't see things near, because farsighted means you can't see things very clearly near. So I didn't have that issue before, but now I do, because I had corrective surgery years ago now to fix this problem. So, so looking at something that small, I would need my reading glasses. The reading glasses definitely make an improvement, but if I don't have the reading glasses, the sharpness on the Retina display on a thing that's only 38 millimeters looks pretty darn good. It actually looks really good. So there is a plus to the Retina display on something that small. On these watches. Now, the watches have a lot of programs. I don't like the layout. I hope they change that eventually, where it's like these little balls for your apps. Your apps are like these little tiny balls on a little tiny screen, and I don't like that. But if you know which apps that you're looking for, it actually is pretty neat, because you can actually see text. If you don't get it right away on your phone, or you don't have your phone nearby, you can actually get your text. Thanks again to the GPS, you can get stuff like that. You can actually get emails if, for some reason, if you want to read, take a quick glance at a text or an email. If the phone rings and your phone's not nearby, it will come right to your phone. So there's some little perks. There's some very little perks. They're not the greatest, but they're not the worst also. And it's another device that actually communicates between your computer, your iPad, your iPhone, and everything else that's Mac. So there's a couple perks to this whole thing. It depends. Is it another expensive toy? Yeah, it actually is. Now, the only thing that I would really like if the watch didn't cost me as much as it did, which it was, I think, a couple $100. It was like $200-$300, which is a lot of money for a watch. Apple's stuff is always much, much more expensive. And somebody actually said on discussion about the new Apple, I think I did a lot of research on it, that they have some watches that are over $1,000 because of the band. The band makes all the difference. The actual internals of all the watches and actually the shell of the watch itself, not the band, they're all exactly the same. It doesn't matter which one you buy. So if you buy one for somebody said some interview I looked at, if you buy an iWatch for $1,000 or $2,000 or even up from there, it's going to be exactly like the same one you're going to buy for $269. There is no difference whatsoever. In the bands right now, there's some aftermarket bands I was looking into because the band I got is very nice, but there's one issue. It is designed for a smaller wrist, which would be a woman's wrist. It does fit my hand, but I'm on like the last notch on the band. So that's the only thing. And so I try to look for bands that were, maybe made by Apple, preferably, or somebody else that actually made a band that is, longer, I guess, in length, because that's my issue right now, to go around a wider wrist. Now, they said they ran into an issue with the iWatches. I'm ready to say phone, pad, or whatever else, but the iWatches. The major issue they ran into, though, is that they are finding out there's people, I guess maybe because they've been on Obamacare for the last 8 years, I'm being sarcastic, but they're discovering people who want to buy the watches, it won't fit around their wrist. So that's including, the smaller version. Now, it's all a matter of preference if you want the smaller, wider screen, but they do kind of indicate that I guess the one is more designed for a woman, even though it doesn't look like a woman's watch that I would ever see. And that all depends on what kind of band you buy. So you can change the bands out. The band I got was just basically a unisex, probably more of a masculine band. It was just a dark charcoal gray nylon band, that thick surf type one that you would get like on a surf watch or something like a shark watch. But the problem is it is a buckled one. And I found one tonight, not from Apple, but a third party that makes special custom, not that expensive, bands that actually are designed for this watch and will have I do have some shark watches, but have the Velcro, which I actually prefer better because you can adjust it a lot easier on your wrist. So that's exactly what I was looking for. So I ordered one of those because actually the one thing what I was starting to say, if the watch was not that expensive, I'd actually preferably prefer to wear it all the time because you get a readout. Literally, it's like having your vitals checked anytime you want. One of the apps that's built into the OS for the iWatch is one that actually checks all your vitals, tells you how many calories you have burned, and, basically tells you your basic information. If you got your vital signs done, your basic ones, that would be constantly regulated. I think that's pretty interesting because I'm kind of curious, if I complain about stuff, some pains and stuff, is it something to be really concerned about? Now, I noticed during the course of the night, I did take my watch off a few times. I don't want to get it ruined, again, because it was a costly thing. I have it insured for the next 2 years. I got the insurance through Apple. It was like $50. It was worth it, though. So if anything happens to the watch, then you know you can just bring it in, and it's got damage protection and everything else. So they prorate it from whatever you pay for the watch. So I paid $50, so it means the watch was only worth like less than a few hundred. I got the cheaper one. But with the band, I want it. But it would be interesting to regulate this stuff because I noticed I'm always concerned because my mother has this too, and my father. I think this is hereditary, is high blood pressure. So I did check. Work definitely raised my blood pressure. I think the lowest I was like high 70s, which is probably not great. I don't even know what's good. As soon as I walked through the door, my blood pressure did kind of jolt up slightly by 10%, 10 points, whatever you want to call it. And while I was working, it actually got up to, I think, 120 or maybe like in the 30s. And as soon as I stopped, the thing is how long does it take your heart to slow down again? It dropped pretty quickly. It actually went from like over 100 and something down to about 80 and then down to like 70s pretty fast. So, that's a good sign that, if you're out of shape or you have heart disease, I think that it would be more consistent of your heart being faster. beaten and not slowing down. But it gives you other stats and things. Some of the apps are pretty cool because it gives you, local. You can actually literally find out local information, local news, local weather. It depends what you want to put on as your apps, but it's all there. So there's certain things. It's literally on your wrist. I mean, yeah, your phone's in your back pocket because I rarely have my phone that far away, but it's sometimes a little more convenient and less of a nuisance to people around you. You just look up and it's oh, okay, this is what's going on right now. By just waving your wrist, it activates the phone because the phone will turn itself off otherwise. So I was kind of surprised with the second one. You really don't get all the benefits if you don't wear it, though. I'm basically not even scratching the surface with the stuff I'm doing. I'm very, very little bit does what I do with this watch. Of course, I've only had it since yesterday, or actually early in the morning when I got up or got home, because I got home around 2 or 3 o'clock, and then I was fooling around with this watch, which that was impressive too, because the watch itself is not that hard to set up. It takes you a matter of minutes to figure out how to do it, because it's been a while since I've had an iWatch, and I never thought I would ever buy another one again. I was interested a little bit of buying the first gen, but I'm glad I didn't, because it actually says you're probably, if you really want to try out an iWatch, get the second one. Don't even bother with the first. The first one's going to be cheaper, but you're going to have probably a little bit more of a benefit with the second one, and plus it's a little bit more durable, because one of the biggest things for me and probably other people is at least spilling something on there, and it actually looks a little bit more durable than the first one. The first one was like a prototype. Even when it was been out for a couple years, it's still kind of technically by the design, it's just like a prototype. The second one was they knew what they were looking for, what they want the watch to do, and they added, not big changes, but changes that were seldom, but not that seldom. They actually did serve some purpose. Again, the biggest one is the GPS. My whole thing is, which is a good thing, I would think, which it might catch on, this would be something, if you're I would say a woman or, a child, maybe having an iWatch is not such a bad idea. Because, when people come up missing, for instance, well, probably if they see the watch, they're going to steal it. If you have one that's less noticeable, like mine is more, looks almost like an ordinary watch or a piece of jewelry. It's an Apple Watch, but you have to look a little closer because it doesn't protrude as far as the iWatch that is the bigger size. I mean, there's very small size, but it's just enough to make it obviously noticeable. Because I'll look at a person and I don't even have to look twice to realize, hey, you got an iWatch on. Because generally people go for the bigger screen, and it's not that much, but it's enough to kind of say, hey, I got an iWatch on my wrist. The one I have is less attention noticeable, whatever you want to call it. But, the one thing is, if they can't find somebody, one of the ways they can sometimes kind of find someone who is missing, I would assume, or whatever you want to say, is by their cell phone at least, because their cell phone has a built-in GPS or a tracker that can track the phone down. Now, that's generally used for if your phone gets stolen. That's the main reason, but it does serve the purpose of, finding somebody, hopefully, or finding pretty close where this person may be, even if you get hurt. But I would think, personally, a watch having in your band with a built-in GPS is probably not that bad of an idea, because if you have it on your wrist, if something happens to you, heaven forbid if they see it, they can take the watch off your hand if somebody kidnaps you, or if you get lost, or if you get hurt. If you're by yourself, you get hurt and there's nobody around. The watch is going to be the closest thing to your body, and depending on how the GPS works, it does send information back on everything on that phone. That will send, literally, it shows you a map of where you're at. So it's on your wrist. It tells that, so-and-so, if they need to find where you're at, if they had to, I don't know how Apple works with this stuff. They could do this. They could track down that person because the homing device is right on their wrist. That's the thing. That's the number one thing. The number two is you can actually, I mean, if you really wanted to, the best thing you could do, I mean, if they go in the direction they're going now, with this iWatch, with the GPS now in there, I think the other thing that would be pretty clever they could actually home in on, you could actually use it to find out, hey, is this person still freaking alive? Because it actually does have a sensor that gives your heart rate, your pulse, well, that's the same thing, I guess. But there's some, like, interesting things that would be beneficial to this watch. And again, like I said, it sounds like I'm talking nonsense, which is nothing new for me because that's what my show consists of, is nonsense. But if you actually would think about this, it has benefits that they could actually tap into. I don't know what would be considered legal or not, but, you can get the person's vitals, you can get the person's location. Two things that you're kind of concerned about. Hey, if it's a child even, which the smaller watch would actually fit perfectly on a, decent size, but a smaller child. But yeah, what was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, you could basically track down, like, your loved one or somebody who you can't find if they had this on. It would be actually a good thing because, again, it's a homing device, and it actually can help because, again, I was kind of curious about that whole GPS thing, and then I saw that it does, pull up, like, the maps and stuff like that on the watch. Now, again, that's where also what fits in really well is the fact that it has that retina display, which I was never a big fan of. And the only where I would see that retina display would probably serve any purpose is on a bigger screen where you start to lose quality when something's too big. A bigger screen, it would make a lot of sense. The retina display would kick in. And there's that middle ground where retina display doesn't make any sense because I have a laptop without retina display, and I really don't need it. Now, on a extremely small screen that you're wearing on your wrist, yeah, retina display does once again serve a purpose because you're talking, the resolution I think is like 300 or something like that. It's not very high. It's like 250, 300. Because you're talking a square screen on the back of your wrist or wherever how you wear your watch. So, something where the resolution can't get that high, it only makes it make more sense to have retina display because that actually makes the clarity that much higher. So there you go. So I've actually surprisingly made a half-hour show of just talking about this iWatch. But it is very cool in some ways. I'll see because I might come back a couple days or a week later and say, you know what, I gave up on this thing. But my main thing was I'd really like to track my health problems because it gives you, it sends it back to your other media or your other Apple devices, including it gives because you can read it better that way on your other devices. When you link it up, it gives you a whole list of what your vitals are again and what kind of benefits you've served, by walking this far or doing this, or if you've gone too far on overexerting yourself. That's all given to you from the technology in this watch. So I like that factor. Now, the thing is, the watches, I'm afraid to get it ruined too quickly or at all because it's a costly watch. I think if the price was cheaper, I would definitely wear it even at work, and if it got damaged, I wouldn't care as much if the cost wasn't as high as it was for the watch. I think it was like $100 for the watch, and, that's all I paid for it. And then that would be an incentive for me to wear it probably more. So if I would have to give feedback to Apple on what would make me like continue to use the watch more often, I would have to say if there was a way, which they really could, and they actually would sell more because it's got a lot of interesting things that you can use the watch for. I would say if there's a way you can lower the price and take less of a profit, because they're probably making a large profit. If they lowered their profit margin, they would probably actually benefit. It would benefit them. They'd actually sell more, because it does have some interesting benefits in the watch, which I never saw the first time around, which I see some of them now. It's pretty much very similar. The OS was updated from the original OS, but the newer watch actually seems more responsive too. It is much more responsive. What I do remember about the first one, it was not, the response time was not as quick. And I remember reading about that, and it was like, yeah, that's a bunch of BS. I mean, I don't see this going to make that much of a difference, because they're both dual core processor. The watches are both dual core. And I'm sure there's other watches out in the market, but my whole thing is that I've always liked the Apple software through and through. I just find it easier to understand and easier to figure out. Now, years ago, I wouldn't say that, because Apple, when it was OS 9 still, I had a really difficult time with that. But I know you're talking different animals, because the OS on the phone, the OS on the watch, and the OS on my other devices, my iPad, my computer, they're all different. They use number systems, but they are completely different. So that's the one thing. But Apple has always, like, for the last so many years, what is it, 10 years now, probably 12 years, whatever, it's actually become very easy to use, and it's because of that factor. That's why I still continue to use Apple products of all sorts. Even, I have what is it called, an iPod mini, and I was using that for quite a bit. I was actually jonesing for it tonight to listen to some music, because the iPod mini, or is it iPod, something like that, it's the really Nano, I think it's the iPod Nano, is really good, because I actually got a housing case to put over top of it with a speaker where I can take it to work. It's a rugged one that protects the Nano, because I keep on saying mini, it's actually called Nano. It protects it really well, and it actually was great because I could listen to music while I was working. I actually, I can't say I worked faster. I actually worked a little slower, because it did slow me down. But it made my time of working, either by myself or with others, much more enjoyable. It made it much more entertaining. That was the one thing I did like. So, so there's certain things I do like about Apple products. I didn't mean to go off this long, but in some ways it's probably good, because I have nothing else really to talk about. I did want to follow up with what I wanted to do. But before that, actually, it was funny. A friend of mine, my friend Todd, had just mentioned he's up with his parents right now, around where his parents are. I think he's staying with them. He actually has an apartment in another location about an hour away, but unfortunately, when he was looking for a job, the best place he could find a job was around his parents, which was an hour from where his apartment is. So obviously he's staying with his parents most of the time, because he has no choice. But anyway, where he's staying, this coming Monday, Donald Trump is going to actually do one of his, I guess it's called a rally or whatever. He's going to do one of his rallies. I'm not sure. I think that's what it is. So, it was like I've been a little bit like flustered with work and stuff like that. I just got to be really careful with my time, though. That's the only thing. Because my time right now, I think it's 2 weeks left of vacation time left, and I have to save 3 of it, a little over 2 weeks. I have to save 3 days because where I work, we have what's called a shutdown, and because of that, I got to save 3 of my vacation days, which is great because then I have off. It's at the end of the year, between Christmas and New Year's. I'll have off for a whole 2 weeks because certain of those days fall, they're actual physical days you're going to have off for the holidays. So that part's great, but then you have to save so many days because, they basically make you save your vacation time. So I get 4 weeks. I get a whole month off of vacation. So somehow I was out for quite a while. I was out on a sick leave, and it was like, wow, I'm going to have all this vacation time by the end of the year. I was like, well, I actually bled through most of that now. Even in not going back to work from my job, I was off for 6 months. When I went back, it was like, wow, I really went through this stuff really quickly. Imagine if I was working 12 months and not just like 6 months. How would I survive? How would I, because I obviously just did and went to anywhere I wanted to go. One, because I was off for a long time, and there was nothing holding me back. I was out on a sick leave, and actually I wasn't that bad off that I couldn't work. It was just something you needed to, some paperwork had to get straightened out and stuff. So, and things investigative. So it was from a work injury. So that was like, oh, wow. But I was living it up. I actually didn't have to take any time off. When I come back, I'm just eating all my time up. So I've already killed 2 weeks of vacation just on day trips and going away to certain things after I got back to work. And it was like, first I felt really bad doing it. And then it was like, after a while, it became easy because I easily got stressed out at work. When you're off for so long, you go back, it's a very intense job I have. And it can be stressful, quite stressful at times. So anyway, so I had a watch because on Monday I was like thinking, you know what? Trump has been close nearby before where he gave, rallies or, he's met up with people or gave, speeches because he's running for president in Philadelphia. And I told people, listen, I will stay away from Philadelphia unless it's a concert. I don't like going in the city whatsoever. So this time he's in a different location, far away from the city in our state, but it's a 2-hour drive from my house. And I'm actually considering doing it because it's not Philadelphia. Now, the only thing is, folks, I didn't think about, I think it's in October, I have different things like I'm supposed to meet. I told friends it's like old news to them. Henry Rollins, which I want to get him to do a plug for my show. Shatner, which I won't get him to do a plug, but I'll be there. And there's some other small events that I had bought tickets for that are going to be coming up in the near future. One is in October at some point in time. So I might be actually William Shatner. So I got to make sure that certain things will fall on weekdays, so I have to save time for that. Other things actually do physically fall on the weekends, which is fine for me because I don't work weekends. I work Monday through Friday. So I'll have to see about that. I'll have to see. But I did actually put in, I said, listen, I'm taking off Monday if I can get it, which I gave my time, because I'd actually like to go to this one. Because one thing I could actually do, folks, is maybe, obviously I'm not going to get anywhere near Trump because for obvious reasons, but at least I'm not going to get Trump to give me, I would love to have him give me a plug for my show. It's like the next possible future president give me a speech for my podcast that nobody listens to would be incredible. Is it going to happen? Absolutely not. But at least I could maybe ask people, interview them like I've done in the past on my phone and ask them, hey, what is your reason for voting for Trump? And, ask simple questions like that. That's what I was hoping. Now, that's going to be on Monday if everything works out. It's a lot of driving. I've done it before. I've actually done day trips back and forth. It's just that it is quite a bit of a hike, though, more than I'd actually like to do in one day. I've done it before, but not willingly. I mean, I'll have to see because I might end up saying, you know what, maybe I'll just stay overnight in a hotel room and come back the next day if that's possible. With work, I'll have to see, but then I'll be wasting 2 days, unfortunately. Now, I'll have to see because, again, everything like this will happen on Monday. And I'm hoping this will, turn out my favor. I just think it would be interesting. Now, a friend of mine, my friend Matt, actually said, hey, he's going to some event. And I apologize, Matt. I actually already forgot what it was about. And he said, hey, would you like to go along? Maybe you can just get people to do plugs for my show. And again, I'm not quite sure what it's about. I think it's like certain people will make unique, that's the best way I can put it, different type of music. Music you would probably hear if you're from the Philadelphia area and you've heard of WXPN. Once in a while, I think that was the station he was mentioning. Maybe possibly he meant Princeton, or I'm misunderstanding both. Where, what can I say? Where, there's some like almost, I don't want to use the word industrial, but, noise sounding music, something a little bit not of the norm. And this is what we were supposed to, if everything works out properly from on my end, I will meet up with him. There's a small cover charge, and he said, well, maybe you can ask these guys to, one, do a plug for my show, and then maybe I could even ask for, hey, what is their, thing on this music? How did they get started? What's their, ask them simple questions. Okay, I'm going to guess, like, what is your influence to make this type of music, or what does it stand for? I don't know. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. So, but that would be something different too, because you have to expand. I have to expand my horizons and not just focus on one thing, which I try to do in the past, and try to look for different things to cover as far as things or people to interview. I think the furthest I've won so far, besides Walt Flanagan and Mike Zapsik, would probably be the furthest I went from that was interviewing down in, I'm trying to think now, Blairstown, the gentleman who owns some like movie house type place. He puts on live performances too. It's a small little. I'm trying to think. I don't want to say venue, but a small. If like for around where I live, there's a place in Phoenixville where the outside of this movie theater was called the Colonial Theater. Was used in this movie called The Blob, the original movie called The Blob. Well, this place in Blairstown is like the same exact kind of idea. I just can't remember the name off the top of my head. So I interviewed the gentleman from that place who basically was restoring the place, shows different types of unique films, and also has live performances on a daily basis. And that was kind of different for me. So that's the kind of stuff I need to kind of expand on and not just keep it focused on, the same topic all the time. Because that kind of helps for me, you, the listener, to keep your interest and maybe obviously get other people interested in listening to me. So, so that's what I want to do, hopefully on Saturday if everything goes all right. And then Monday, it's going to be a lot of driving, but if I could go, it's at 6 o'clock. I definitely would not mind seeing this Trump rally, because it would be something a little bit, different from what I'm, normally would try to do as an interview with somebody. And I also did that interview with Tommy Conwell, too. That was a little bit different. I thank my friend Matt for that one. So anytime anybody kind of presents me with anything, I'm going to try to discover a different avenue, I guess, from what I am where my comfort zone is. By the way, folks had texted me. He's like, yeah, I just got a free ticket to Donald Trump to see him. I think it was somewhere in, I'm trying to think, Wilkesboro. There's a casino up that direction. And, he basically said, I'm going to go to that casino to go see Donald Trump. Because there were free tickets that were given out. it was like, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing it just to take a day off of work and doing something, something that's different from what I would normally do. And it was like, he sent me the link, and I actually, surprisingly, you're allowed up to 2 free tickets. And I actually had no problem. I got the ticket like right away. I have it right in front of me. So, yeah, so that was actually pretty interesting, and I'd like to pursue that if I can. Now, so that's what's going to happen, by the way, on Monday. Another thing is what I've been doing with my time off, besides working a heck of a lot, is that it was funny. I mean, this is the month I actually wanted to almost kind of focus on this now too. Is like, this is October, so this is the month, like, this is my favorite month because October means Halloween and stuff. Now, I don't really do much for Halloween, but I figured, I like to kind of keep my theme. That's why I once again reposted Roberto his plug, because, hey, he made that movie Phantasm. So this is a perfect time. This is the month, for the opening announcer saying, hey, you're listening to iWalter, would best be Roberto, because he did Phantasm, and also obviously Rob Zombie, because he makes horror movies. So anyway, it's funny because I just started getting into this from like last year. I started doing this, and I'm basically continuing buying this stuff, or the old classic horror movies. So like, I'm talking, because I'm looking at them right now. I actually bought like the complete set. I've watched like 2 of the films already of Frankenstein. Now, it's kind of funny. They're not really that good, but I grew up with those films, and I actually was kind of interested in watching the rest of them. The rest of these technically classic Hollywood horror films, literally Hollywood films from back in the day. I think these are from like, the 40s and the 50s. So it was like, well, I remember growing up with these and watching these on Saturday afternoons, and I never got to see them all. And then Svengoolie actually shows a lot of these films too. So I got all the Frankensteins, the complete set, and they weren't that expensive. I think it was $20 for all the Frankensteins, because they're very old. I got the DVD version. I didn't even bother to get Blu-ray. Now, apparently, though, I would have bought them online from Amazon. The Blu-rays were actually cheaper than the DVDs. I think they were $3 cheaper, and you get like the higher quality. But the only problem is, honestly, folks, you won't see any difference, because these movies, you can restore films, but films like that, there's not much to look at, even if they do restore them. So, and when I originally watched them, I watched them at home, obviously, and it was on probably a 13-inch TV set, because that was considered a big set back in the day, or maybe slightly bigger than that, maybe a 20-inch TV set. And, it's not the same. It was on, what do you call it? When it was, before it was HD signal. It was like the regular, snowy signal used to watch all these shows, movies with on Saturday afternoons, these old movies. So, but for some reason, it was like, I've seen all the other horror movies. I like to kind of like rewatch some and watch the other ones of these literally classic horror films. And so that's what I end up buying, because Walmart actually had a really good deal. Amazon, I actually bought these other ones from. And it was actually a good deal. I bought, they were like the complete trilogy set of, again, these different films, and it was all of the movies of The Invisible Man, all the films of The Mummy, because I always thought, that's what I'm going to go into a little bit, but I'm not going to spend much more time, because I'm already getting up to an hour, and I want to keep it around an hour. But all the mummies, which were my growing up, I thought they were my personal favorites, or The Mummy. And then all the Wolfmen. And there's a reason I want to bring this up actually now with The Mummy. And, so I have all the Frankensteins, the complete set of Frankenstein, complete set of The Invisible Man, the complete set of The Mummy, Wolfman, Mummy, Frankenstein, Invisible Man. Because they were like, back in the day, they were like very popular films. They were our horror films today are Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Candyman, and there's some other ones too, Leprechaun, a little bit different. I know I'm leaving some out. Chainsaw, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, things like that. So it's actually, obviously, it's taken a twist. I can't say for the best, but that's what we basically are horror movie monsters of today. But back then it was Invisible Man, The Mummy, Wolfman, Frankenstein, and I guess that were like the main ones. So I wanted to see like the original classic horror films. I wanted to watch not just the original ones, but the ones that were the sequels. So to my surprise, how I can kind of see how history either is, I don't want to say repeats itself, but like how these movies actually, I could see how they influence others, especially The Mummy, because the original one was Boris I can't say his name correctly, Boris Karloff. He did the original Mummy. That one was interesting. The storyline was a bit weak, but it was interesting. So it was interesting enough that they made a sequel, but the sequel had a different actor playing the Mummy. And it was funny. Apparently, the sequel obviously did did better than the one with Boris Karloff because it followed a different tactic. So, but the funny thing was, it was called the original one was just called The Mummy. The second one's called The Hand of the Mummy. And then the third one is called Tomb of the Mummy. Well, the second one obviously did pretty good. The sequel did good on The Mummy, that they actually continued it even after they killed the character of the Mummy off. How do you kill something that's dead? Well, they burned it. And they brought it back like, oh, it never got burned. And they picked up where the second movie was with the Mummy. Now, you're talking back in the 50s or was it 40s or 50s that they actually did this whole thing where the creature was not killed, even though it technically was, and they revived the dead creature and said, okay, it did survive, just like they do nowadays with these horror movies. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that, probably most likely our directors of today, the directors of our time, probably grew up with movies like Frankenstein, The Werewolf, The Invisible Man, and they watch not only the originals, but they watch the sequels. So that gives them ideas of like, hey, you know what? Ideas of how to bring these monsters back like they're literally, I'm trying to think of how to say the right word. I know what it is. It's in the back of my mind. Immortal. They can't die. They're going to live forever. You can't kill these things because these creatures can't be destroyed. So this all started, this is the first time I actually seen a movie that was not only a sequel with The Mummy, but actually a continuation that was made up, to continue the legacy or continue the same timeline. Now, it was kind of funny, though, because with The Mummy, there was supposed to be a 30-year span, so they did bring back two of the actors from the second movie of The Mummy's Hand, and they had to make them look 30 years older. So, and like most horror movies, which you've seen this before, especially in Friday the 13th, the two remaining characters from the original film get killed automatically almost near the beginning of the film. And one, I guess they couldn't even get this other person to come back who was this woman who was the main lead and lady. They couldn't have her come back or get her to come back, so they basically just killed her off or said she was dead already. So that's always an issue too. If you can't get an actor to return for a cameo, then you got to make up an excuse why they're not in the film in the sequel. So that was the first time this is probably where this all started from, of how to get around plot lines and characters that won't, actors who won't come back to play their character again, or that old, not old, but that whole thing I've seen, but I didn't realize this started elsewhere, where, okay, we need you to come back for a scene, but you're only going to last for so long because this character you're playing is going to actually be killed off, either very quickly or eventually. You're not going to make it to another sequel. That's the bottom line. So this is stuff I've seen, but obviously these ideas were, these directors of our time saw these older films, and this is where they got these ideas from. Does that make any sense to you guys? I don't know. So that was pretty interesting. Like I said, it was the first time, and the Mummy movies actually are the ones that actually brought this to my attention, which actually makes it that much more interesting. The films themselves aren't like aesthetically pleasing, I guess. Otherwise, they have hot leading ladies. I don't know what they look like now, because you're talking like 50, 60 years ago. Who knows? Yeah, they're probably not even alive anymore, but they definitely got very attractive looking leading ladies for even these mummy movies, the Frankenstein movies. I just hit my mic. And all these other ones. I haven't even dug into the Wolfman or The Invisible Man. Now, here was one thing, folks, that really caught my attention, because when I got to the third Mummy movie, the actor who played the mummy was a different actor yet. It was like, well, this guy looks like nothing like the guy who played it in the last film, or the film before that, obviously, because the first one was Boris Karloff. Then they got some completely different actor to play the same character again, and they're probably thinking, well, the guy's got bandages on. You're not going to see his face. It's like, well, this guy's got his hair pasted back, like he has slicked back, like greased back. He's playing a mummy, and his hair is slicked back, greased back. The actor who's playing the mummy, and just basically like white paint was probably put on his head, even though it's black and white, something to make it look like. But I mean, the makeup on the face looked great, but then the head looked, the hair looked like, okay, this guy is supposed to be, what was it, 3,000 years old, and he's got a full head of hair, yet the rest of his body is like, is disintegrated or whatever, or it looks really hideous, but he's got a full head of hair, and it's all slicked back. So it was like, that's the way the second movie picked up. The first one, the Boris Karloff played in, was actually really good makeup. The second one was just like, looked nothing like him. It was supposed to be the same mummy, but he looked different. He had a full head of hair that was slicked back, like pasted back. And this kind of had taken away, but the guy was pretty slender. The actor was pretty slender. The third movie, they got even yet another actor to play the part, and this guy looked like he needed to go on a major diet because he was pretty husky. He was almost like, well, for a mummy who is 3,000 years old and should probably, if he hasn't eaten, because the only thing that keeps this mummy alive, by the way, are these ancient, this ancient plant. I can't remember the name of this ancient plant that is made into a serum that has kept the mummy alive for over 3,000 years. So he doesn't eat any staple food. He's a freaking mummy. He's a living corpse that's been alive for 3,000 years. So it was believable because Boris Karloff was a very thin man. The other actor is an extremely thin man. Was an extremely thin man. You get to the third movie, it's like, this guy looks like he's just eaten a 7-course meal. He's got a big gut on him, practically. He's this big, kind of husky. So, looking at that, it was like, well, this is kind of, it's a little ridiculous. And he had his hair slicked back, but it was a different actor. Now, the only thing why I'm going into this film to this extent, the third Mummy movie, which again was called, it was called, because I forget now, I mentioned it, it was called The Tomb of the Mummy, was because the actor who played the mummy, by the way, was an extremely very well-known man of many faces. Yeah, it was actually Lon Chaney. Was it Lon Chaney? Because there's Lon Chaney Jr., who was well known for playing the Wolfman, but it was Lon Chaney Jr.'s father, who in the third movie of the Mummy was Lon Chaney himself. So, nobody really kind of knew Lon Chaney for what he really looked like, because, again, he was known as the man of a million faces. Like, nobody really knew what Lon Chaney looked like, besides probably his son, who also had taken up acting. And, obviously went on to do horror movies, but was best known for the Wolfman, the Wolfman movies. And there was a series of those. So that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up, because now I own the Mummy movies and stuff. And now I heard Lon Chaney. I don't really know much about him. I just knew he was like an extremely well, I guess like a stuntman slash, again, he was called the man of a million faces because nobody knew really Lon Chaney much more than from the different characters and faces he played. Now, that was the one thing that Lon Chaney did in his version of the Mummy, is it did look pretty creepy. It looked actually extremely creepy, minus that he was just, a stocky, his son was kind of stocky too. Had that kind of stocky build. But on a mummy that's 3,000 years old, to have a gut on him just did not kind of, that's just the way Lon Chaney was built. He was a husky guy. And, it was just like, I was looking at it, it was like, the part that got to me is like, this guy needs, this character, this mummy in the version that Lon Chaney played is like, he needs to go on a diet. I mean, I know that the character's not eaten, but it certainly doesn't show, because he needs to go like the Jenny Craig Weight Watchers. The freaking mummy is like, he's falling out of his straps because he's so heavy. Like, it looked like the costume, his belly was coming out on one side. I don't know. I'm kind of exaggerating, but, it just looked that bad. I mean, my guess is because Lon Chaney was known as, the man who could just play all these wild characters and stuff by, disguising his appearance completely. My guess is by the time he actually did this third sequel, the third movie, I should say, of The Mummy, is probably close to where he was ready to retire anyway. He's probably, up there in age, obviously. And as my one friend Matt says, when you get older, your elasticity kind of gets weaker, and you gain weight a lot quicker. You put weight on much faster than you are when you're younger. And I think that's probably what it was. Now, I think there's two more Mummy movies. Like, honestly, I went right to the Mummy movies when I got all these. I got 3 of these monsters, collection of monster movies just yesterday. And the first thing I wanted to do was watch the Mummy movies, because I remember growing up, when you're a kid, you look at things through different eyes. And I'll tell you, the Mummy's eyes were creepy. But you look through a different set of eyes when you're a kid, and watching these, I always remembered the Mummy movies actually probably being the most frightening ones of all of the movies to me. But I never saw them all. I only saw 1 or 2, and the ones what I could remember of them were the ones that really just kind of freaked me out. So that's why I wanted to go that direction. I do want to eventually, because, again, this is the month, and I will try to keep people informed. It probably will be just on the Mummy right now, and probably once I can get through, because I've watched on Frankenstein, I watched Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein. And those were okay, but honestly, these older films, the one problem I do have, I end up dozing off, and because it doesn't keep my attention. I mean, the audience you had back when these movies were put out are definitely a lot less overstimulated than we are nowadays. So when you watch these films, what scared people 50, 60 years ago obviously don't scare this generation now, doesn't scare me, and it's just hard to keep my attention because I'm not, being held on the edge of my seat like people were back when these movies first came out, these films. And that's why they made so many of them, because it's just like, wow, this is different. And the makeup for the time on Frankenstein, the werewolf, the mummy, and the Invisible Man were just, well, you can't see the makeup on the Invisible Man because you can't see him. But actually, honestly, that whole technique was just very interesting with even the Invisible Man, because the whole way there was an actor there, but the way they blurted him out was just something they still use nowadays. Something to that extent, how they make that effect work. So, I mean, these were films that just really, captured people for, quite a long time, quite a few, many decades. And I wanted to go back and kind of like look and see what these things consisted of, these movies, and what made these so great. And something different from your normal slasher movies, because these did not have bloodshed. Some of them are almost humorous, like even when the mummy is like Lon Chaney playing the mummy, is supposed to be killing this woman, one of his victims, and all he's doing is he's literally laying his hand across the woman's throat, and it just looks so cheesy compared to nowadays, where they actually go in and you got these quote unquote these monsters ripping these people apart. Like literally, you see these people getting ripped apart. Where back then, in those days, you didn't need that all that stimulation to get aroused or frightened by these films. So it's a whole different genre that grew up with these films. And there's something to be said about that, because honestly, if it wasn't for those films, those movies would not have influenced these directors over these decades, over the past couple decades, that now make the films they do nowadays. Now, is the progression that has come forth from these movies, is that like a good thing? Not really. I mean, it is an artwork, don't get me wrong, because you watch like these films that are horrific with the violence, there is something to be said about the artwork that goes into making these figures of humans that are, they're being mutilated. I mean, that's not a good thing, and it's not giving people positive reinforcement, or whatever you want to say, positive stimuli, because people then want to reenact what they see. But I look at it for the art factor, that, hey, somebody actually puts a lot of effort and work into making these prosthetics and these, I want to call them dummies, like these fake figurines that look almost real, out of latex, rubber and stuff. Because there was certain shows, I think there's one on Sci-Fi, Face Off, and they show you, and there's other ones too, where these people, that's like an art, creating these things for these movies. That's a whole art form there. So unfortunately, it's not always a good positive reinforcement for a lot of people. But this all got started, in my opinion, from movies from yesteryear, as they would put it, from years ago, I'm sorry, not centuries ago. From almost, actually, it is almost a century ago, because the people who got influenced by Frankenstein and stuff, those people who got influenced by Frankenstein, The Mummy, and Wolfman, the people who made those films got influenced almost, at about 30 or so years before those movies came out. Like, those directors got influenced. The directors from Hollywood who made, again, Wolfman, Invisible Man, Mummy, and Frankenstein, all those directors were influenced by movies probably like Phantom the Opera or like the silent first horror film of Nosferatu. I mean, it just follows and it just progresses from these very simple films to more complex films. So it's kind of interesting, and that to me is fascinating. That's really fascinating. I could talk about this, folks, for hours. Unfortunately, I've been on for an hour and 15 minutes, and that being said, again, I could continue on, but my one problem is it is like 5:15 in the morning, and I've been on for over an hour, and I want to keep it at an hour. I don't want to make a 2-hour show. So, folks, I hope what I discussed tonight seemed a little interesting to you. I'm not sure until I listen back how I sound. But if you enjoy what I'm talking about or mention tonight, I try to keep it lighthearted. Didn't want to get too deep into politics, even though I did mention about going to a Trump rally. I didn't get into large detail about it or, grave details about this stuff or anything. I just hope you enjoyed what I talked about, though. That's what I'm trying to say. I definitely enjoy mentioning things that I hope interest other people. And that being said, if you listen to me, thank you very much. And if you enjoy what I'm talking about, just try to get other people listening too, because I would love to increase my listener base from the handful I continue to have. So thank you so much. And this is Walter from iWalter, and yes, I am signing off for now.